International Monetary Fund consults its legal department in Washington, D.C. ahead of declaration on whether controversial $2 billion China bauxite deal is either a debt on Ghana's books or it's simply a barter deal as claimed by government. Tonight, the IMF has dropped a significant hint on what verdict it is most likely to pronounce as a response to NDC minority position, pointing to a precise definition of debt it plans to use in settling the controversy. We have details.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensa.
Top Story is always brought to you by Bond. Your success, our passion is also brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder, Vodafone, the future is exciting, ready, and Nationwide Health Insurance. Now, the NDC minority had petitioned the IMF with accusations that government had misrepresented the controversial $2 billion China bauxite deal as a barter arrangement when it is in fact a loan with implications for our debt management. Well, tonight the IMF is providing clarity on how it plans to resolve that controversy. Joy News has cited an IMF document which will be used as a basis to settle this matter. The document accepted by the Ghanaian government as part of the IMF program clearly defines what constitutes debt. Already, the minority is claiming victory over the matter. Under the controversial China bauxite deal, China will invest the equivalent of $2 billion in building infrastructure in Ghana. In return, Ghana will provide the Chinese processed bauxite with the same amount. Now, government insists the deal is simply a barter arrangement, but the minority disagree, insisting it's simply a loan. So let's examine the IMF documents we have secured, particularly the document the IMF says it will use to settle the controversy. My colleague with the business team just joined me in the studio, George Wiafe, with the response. Let's start with the response. And this was written to Honorable Ken Oforiata. It was copied to Ken Oforiata and Honorable Makasebe, who is the chair of the Finance Committee, of course. Ken Oforiata is the Finance Minister, but primarily was sent to Honorable Kesela Tofosin.
And it was dated on August 30, 2018.
What does he say?
Well, it says that, dear Honorable Fosin, it says, thank you for the letter expressing concerns about infrastructure arrangement between the government of Ghana and the Sino-Hydro Corporation. You asked the IMF's opinion on whether the agreement between the government of Ghana and Sino-Hydro Corporation should be classified as government debt under the program, and whether it should contribute to the stock of government debt. We use the definition in the government debt in the technical memo of understanding, which has not changed since the inception of the program, to make this decision.
Okay, then that's an interesting point. And we have secured a copy of the technical memo of understanding, which defines what debt really is. But it also goes ahead to talk about where they are currently in trying to resolve this controversy, which is that they understand and they admit that this is a complex matter.
Yeah.
And so they have referred the matter to their headquarters
in Washington.
Specifically to the legal department. And it says that they are going to discuss the issue with the authorities at the headquarters, at the legal department, during the upcoming 7th review mission under the extended credit facility.
Which should be this month, because the team is going to come to town to find out how we fared under the program, whether we're on track. And some have said that this mission visit will be critical, because if indeed we are going to complete the program in April 2000, and Evans, April 2019, when the IMF board will meet and look at the staff report, do the assessment based on whether we've done and met all those critical conditions by the end of this year. So they'll do the assessment this month, and then they will forward their report to the legal team. If the visiting team or mission established that under the IMF program, arrangements like these should be captured as debt. Then they will put it in their staff report and then send it to the mission.
Now, the question is, why is that important? Because I understand it has serious implications for
our
us.
debt.
Yeah.
And under this program, why we're trying to ensure that we manage our debt, balance it with our revenue, the fact that we've built enough assets to pay off these debts on time, and don't take on too much debt that will have implications for the economy and even the program.
Okay.
So if this is going to be classified as part of our debt, it will have an implication on the stock of debts that will end the year with. And don't forget that in each year, because of this program, we've set certain critical benchmarks that we have to look at in terms of matching our revenue, or whether the economy has expanded in a way that the debt wouldn't be a problem. So our fiscal deficit will also be a big issue as well.
What you're saying is it will possibly violate the terms of this IMF program.
And again, the targets that we set for end of year. So if we breach that target,
have implications for our debt to GDP
ratio, which we are supposed to meet certain benchmarks for us to indeed say that we've met those benchmarks, and indeed we can submit the staff report to the board not later than April 2019.
And again, might have an impact on how soon we can exit
the program.
Okay,
and don't forget that there have been instances where we've been given waivers because the IMF itself.
Before we go there, let's deal with the document we have secured. The IMF, in the response you just pointed to a document they say they will be using to make that determination whether this is debt or it is simply a barter arrangement that has no debt implications. Now, that document is the Technical Memorandum of Understanding, and this was signed with the government of Ghana back in 2016, just about the time that we had signed on to the IMF program. And this is what we committed to do. And just for the avoidance of doubt, that document defines in clear terms every single item that is a subject of this deal, which is and one of the most important things that this document defines is debt, which is essentially what the minority is asking.
This program, what can we define as debt?
Now, I want to quickly read the preamble to this, and then George will tell us how the IMF defines debt. And then we'll move on to the second leg of this. And we'll be speaking to economist Professor Bokwing on whether this definition applies to the bauxite deal. Now, it says that for the purpose of this technical memo of understanding, the definition of debt is set out in paragraph 8 and it points another document. But it says it doesn't only refer to debt as defined in paragraph 8 of the executive board decision, but also to commitments contracted or guaranteed for which value has not been received. Now, George, this is an important point I wanted to take. It says the definition of debt is as follows. Let's talk about the first definition of debt.
So it says, for the purpose of these guidelines, the term debt will be understood to mean current, i.e. not contingent, liability created under a contractual arrangement to the provision of value in the form of financial or non-financial assets, quote, including currency, or services which requires the obligor to make one or more payments in the form of assets.
Now, that is an important bit. We'll come to that. The form of assets. You move
or
on,
services or future points, time. That is, these payments would discharge the principal or the interest liabilities that incurred under the contract. Now, details take a number of forms. That is, primary ones being following loans.
So, in other words, the debts that he just described take the following forms.
Yes.
And the important bit that will come to, which the minority, of course, Kesa Tufosing, is pointing to, is what you read earlier on, that debt includes one or more payments in the form of assets, including currency or services at some future points in time. Now, what are the forms?
So you're looking at one loan, that is an advance of money to the obligor by the lender made on the basis of undertaking that the obligor required to pay funds in the future, including deposits, bonds, debentures, commercial loans and buyers and creditors as well, temporary exchanges of assets that are equivalent to fully collateralizing loans under the obligor is required to repay the funds and usually pay interest by repurchasing a collateral from the buyer in the future, quote, such as purchase of agreement and official swap agreement. Now you're looking at, again, let's look at supplier's credit, where a contract where the supplier permits the obligor to defer payment until time that after the date on which the goods are delivered, the services are provided. So we're talking about supplier's credit here. Let's look at lease, i.e. arrangement under the property is provided which the licensee or the lessee has the right to use one or more specified periods or time, usually shorter than the total expected service of life or property, which the lessor remains as the title inception of the lessee. Or all these payments are expected to be made during the period of arrangement, excluding those repayments or payments that cover the operation and repair and maintenance of the property. Now, under the definition of debt is set out in point A. Above, arrears, penalties, judiciary awarded damages arising from the failure to make payment under a contractual arrangement.
Well, let's go to the phone lines. Let's speak to Keselato Forting. Of course, this letter was written to him. He is a former Deputy Finance Minister, a ranking member on the Finance Committee in Parliament. Mr. Forting, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you, Evans.
Also joining us on the line right now is Dr. Marcus Sibeyeboa, who is the chairman of the Finance Committee in Parliament. He was copied in that letter. Hello, Doc.
Hey.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Forson, let me start with you. This technical memorandum of understanding that we just read out, does the definition of debt there apply to the controversial 2 billion China bauxite deal?
Evans, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. The bauxite deal in question that was passed by Parliament, my opinion, should be classified as public debt. It is indeed supplier's credit. It's a form of a loan, and it should be accepted as such. And I do not understand why the government is creating the impression as if it is not a public debt, but rather a barter. Evans, the evidence available to us is that government of Ghana, under the agreement, has a responsibility to mine the bauxite, refine the bauxite into alumina, find a buyer outside the country, sell to the buyer, and then obviously collect the money, pay it into an escrow account, which is a government account and a public fund, and then use that to service a debt. Under the obligation, per what you read in the Technical Memorandum of Understanding, the TMU, Government of Ghana, which is the GOG, has a responsibility in servicing the debt. This is nothing but a loan. I think the IMF, the resident representative, is only serving as a liaison between the headquarters and that of the government of Ghana. She's only replied the letter. She has a responsibility to forward the letter to their HQ, even though in the statement they made a point that they are going to use the TMU to make a determination. For me, I feel vindicated, obviously, because the terms as we asked for, we were only asking for the IMF to clarify whether the methodology in calculating public debt has changed. Because of recent, we are seeing change in methodology where the government of Ghana is using different ways of calculating public debt, even in arrest. So we thought something has changed. For me, she's only come back to tell us that the methodology hasn't changed and the debt as defined at the beginning of the program in the TMU still stands. That for me answers the question. And I know that at the end of the day, the IMF headquarters and their legal department will clarify that position going forward and let Ghanaians be aware that that is the position. I feel good at this point.
You feel good at this point. Stay on the line for me briefly. Let me bring in your colleague, Chair of the Finance Committee. Dr. Marcus Sibeyeboa, you've seen both documents, particularly the technical memo. Is that your understanding? Do you agree with what we just heard from your colleague?
If it was that straightforward, I would think the resident rep would have pronounced on it clearly. And she says she has to get back to headquarters, consult with their legal department. Interestingly enough, she quoted in the response, which I was copied, that because of the complex nature of this arrangement, note, the complex nature of this arrangement, the IMF itself agrees that this government has the ingenuity exhibited by this government is something that they haven't seen in recent times. The only case that we have, which we have pointed it out to the minority, is an example in Kenya. And in that case, the IMF didn't count that arrangement as public debt. Same in the case of the energy sector bond, the ESLA bond. The IMF argued with us back and forth, and we pointed them to a case in Nigeria. You can't shift the goalposts when we have agreed to the memorandum of understanding. So when we pointed out to them in Nigeria in the case of the ESLA bond, and lately in the case of this BATA arrangement, where we have one in Kenya, I think the IMF is confident that we know what we are doing. This is a BATA. Sino Hydro, which is a subsidiary of Power China, is borrowing on its own books. They are coming to execute the jobs here. We have bauxite, and the arrangement is that we'll use the bauxite to service this road construction that they are going to do. They are happy with it. The president of China, the president have met in China, and they have executed the agreement. I think what the Ghanaian people want to see is that their roads are being fixed. As to whether this is a BATA, this is a loan, and this back and forth, I don't think it helps anybody.
But it has implications, and I know you know that if the IMF categorizes this as a loan, it will have serious implications for our debt stock.
So why didn't the IMF pronounce on it? You wrote to the IMF, and they are saying that this is a complex arrangement. They are unable, the resident rep is unable to pronounce on it. She has to consult the legal department of the IMF headquarters. We have met them, and we have explained all of these issues to them. I have been to China twice on this deal. The Chinese are comfortable. The Ghanaian party is also comfortable, and I think we are good to go. We are just waiting for the deferred payment agreement to come in, and then what I want to see is my Mamfi to Kufudia Road being fixed.
Yes. But Doc, let's return to the IMF. Thankfully, in this document, has clearly told us how they intend to settle this matter, which is
not clear. It is not clear.
No, I'm saying that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. If you wait, you understand what I'm saying. The clarity they provide is how they intend to settle the matter, not that they have settled it, and the how is the technical memorandum of understanding.
I agree.
Now they say that understanding defines a debt, and it says debt is, for the purposes of the guidelines, will be understood to mean a current, that is not contingent liability, created under a contractual arrangement through the provision of value in the form of financial and non-financial assets or services, and which requires the obligor to make one or more payments in the form of assets. Isn't that what we are doing with this arrangement, bauxite?
That's why I was cutting you short. That it's not clear. You are defining asset to be the bauxite. Is that not it?
I mean, I'm just asking a question. Doesn't it apply?
That's why I gave you the instance in Kenya, and Honorable Atufosi knows it very well. He will speak to it. Okay, I gave you the example in Nigeria when we did the ESLA bond. Okay, this government has considered all options available. We could have just gone to the market. Mind you, we went to the market to borrow 2 billion euro bond. We are not scared of taking a loan to develop this country. But we have bauxite reserves, and we think that this is a fine opportunity rather than give the bauxite reserves to an individual to exploit. Get into an arrangement whereby Sino Hydro comes in, builds our rules, and then in exchange, my brother, this is a BATA arrangement which existed pre-colonial times. Don't you know about BATA?
Yes, but Doc, I just respectfully, my question was direct. As far as this definition goes, do you or do you not accept what your colleague said, that it clearly applies to this arrangement we had with China in the bauxite, with the bauxite deal?
If you had read further, when Honorable Atufosi was, he also said that this is a supplier's credit. Okay, there are a number of definitions down there. I've read what you are also reading from. There are a number of definitions there. I say that this government's ingenuity has to be appreciated. I have not seen such an arrangement before. We've explained to the fund, we've explained to the Chinese, and they are comfortable with it. They also, in the agreement, says it's a BATA. It's an exchange of, I build roads for you. In return, you give me your refined bauxite. I think.
So do I have a categorical answer for you from saying that this technical memorandum of understanding and the definition in there does not apply to this deal with China?
the definition applies that this is a complex arrangement. And so the fund itself hasn't seen this before. There's only one example in Kenya which I point you to, and the Honorable Atufosi has done research on it widely. And
but did I hear you just say the definition applies?
The definition applies to the extent that you are borrowing a direct loan, contingent liability, suppliers credit, all of which you have enumerated. This is bauxite in exchange for roads that I'm building for you. And I don't think we've seen anything in recent times.
But so if it applies, then it's debt.
That would be your definition. And I would think that the resident rep, Natalia, should have made it quite clear to us. You've seen the letter. She's copied me. And she says that at this point, she's unable to speak to you because she specifically says that this is a complex arrangement. Don't take that for granted. This is a complex arrangement, and she thinks that she needs time to consult before she can pronounce on this.
Case letter forcing, and Dr. Asibeba points to something in the response, which is that the IMF itself says this is a complex matter. And so, aren't you jumping the gun saying that you are vindicated when the IMF itself says it's complex? It's not that straightforward, and we want the legal department at the headquarters to help us resolve.
Evans. Thank you, Evans. Let me make 2 points. The matter is only complex, obviously, because you can see a clear attempt of government to hide a public debt. That is why it is complex. The responsibility of the resident representative or the resident office is to serve as a liaison between GOG and IMF HQ. Obviously, if they are to receive a letter of this sort, it is only fair on the part of the resident representative not to make a determination. The program in question was not designed here at the resident representative's office. It was designed at the HQ. So she has a responsibility to forward it to HQ and seek clarity and direction from HQ. In making that determination, they have no choice than to use the Technical Memorandum of Understanding, the TMU. And that is why she's saying that they are going to use the Technical Memorandum of Understanding to make that determination. At the end of the day, we live in this country. The truth will come out. Now, the issue of whether the matter is better or not. Even let no one lie to us that Sino Hydro is going to take the bauxite themselves or mine the bauxite. Under the agreement, Government of Ghana has that responsibility to mine the bauxite, find a way and refine the bauxite into an alumina. So Government of Ghana will set up the refinery. Government of Ghana will now also have a responsibility in finding a buyer and sell to the buyer at a price that is arranged by Government of Ghana. When we are to get the proceeds, we will have to now pay that amount into the Government of Ghana's account. And then we will use that money as in that escrow account that is owned by Government of Ghana to service the debt. Let me also mind you that that revenue flow, that money at the end of the day that we are going to get from the bauxite revenue or the alumina revenue is Government of Ghana's asset. And we are going to use that to service the debt. How can this be a better agreement? Evans, I am not colorblind. When I see red, I will know it's red. When I see something that is white, I will know it is white. I'm not colorblind. Let the government do what is right. We are not against development of infrastructure for the Republic of Ghana. But obviously, we have a responsibility to check the government to make sure the government does not misreport. You can see a clear attempt of Government of Ghana trying to hide public debt. And that is our concern. So let them do the right thing. We will support any government that will attempt to build infrastructure for government, for the people of Ghana. After all, we are a party that is noted in building infrastructure.
Okay.
In the last administration, we spent $7 billion in putting up infrastructure for Ghana.
Okay.
So what stops us? Let them do what is right.
I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Kesela Tofosi. He is the ranking member on the Finance Committee, former Deputy Finance Minister. Let's attempt to get an independent view on this, then help us settle this matter. Let's speak to Professor Bokping, joins us on the telephone line right now. He is Professor Godfred Bokping with the University of Ghana Business School, Head of Finance there. Prof, thank you for your time here on Top Story. Hello, Prof. I think we've lost him on the line there, but I still have with George. George, you've heard the two sides to this.
Interesting. But again, when we're going through the document, you saw that there's some level of ambiguity as in how the fund itself want to classify what a debt is. And that is why even the rest rep is asking that let's even go, not just even the staff in DC, but the legal department for some clarity on it.
They're taking this seriously because of the implications it
on
has
our
for
debt
Ghana.
stock and also our budget deficit and all those things, because it has implications on the targets that will meet this year, end of year, for us to say that we have met those critical benchmarks to end the program in April 2019. So if you look at these documents, or you look at the document, clearly you see that there's some ambiguity on how the definition. That's why in one breath, Dr. Makispe want to believe that, listen, this is not a debt.
Okay, hold on. Let me bring in Professor Bokpin, who just joined us on the telephone line. Prof, thank you for your time. You're on Top Story. Hello, Prof.
Thank you. Good evening, and good evening to your cherished listeners.
Great. Thank you. Grateful to have you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've seen the technical memorandum of understanding.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I've seen it.
And the relevant portions. Now, and I know you also have a fair idea of what this China bauxite deal really is. Now, based on what you've just read, does the definition of debt as the IMF provides in that document apply to this China deal?
I think that it's a very complex issue. I want to believe that it's not that straightforward. The IMF Ghana office would have responded. My own careful reading of the memorandum of understanding, it's not that clear to me whether this particular transaction can easily be classified as pure public debt. It's a bit of a challenge. I think it requires a little bit of legal interpretation. I want to believe the IMF would want to consult the legal department for some kind of operational definition of the construct. So that is how I see it. But if you look at it broadly, I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to classify the transaction as purely a barter transaction. It's very, very difficult.
Do I hear you saying that it might also have elements of a pure debt that will have implications for us in it as well?
I think so. I think that if you look at it within our own public financial management provisions and all of that, it has certain features that qualify as debt. Of course, it also has certain features that qualify also as a barter arrangement. So that is the difficulty that we have, and I think it's not that straightforward. And I think once there is a document that can be interpreted to solve this problem, I think we should leave it to the IMF and to decide. I don't think it's going to be that easy, because I want to believe that if you look at the arrangement, government has a point largely why they would want to classify this as
a barter. But my question to you is,
I want to believe that we can't also discount the view of the opposition. Party totally.
Let me ask a brief question for the sake of time. Having read the IMF document where the IMF says they'll be using to settle the matter, where are you most inclined to lean based on your own expertise in this particular area, based on the definitions you've seen in that document? Are you more inclined to lean towards a debt for Ghana or simply a barter, based on the definition in the IMF document?
That's a very difficult question. Sometimes no question is as difficult as that to which the answer is very obvious. I think I'll leave that to the IMF to decide. Okay. And I also think that it requires a little bit of legal interpretation also. If you look at the document from the IMF, it's not that clear in terms of the constituents of what you are going to use to even decide. And I want to believe that is why the Ghana office probably referred to the IMF head office. And I want to believe that they would want to engage government to understand further their intention, which probably are represented in the document. I want to believe that is the approach they have adopted. And I would want to wait and perhaps also get a little bit of clarification from legal people on how they would want to interpret some of the terms and words that are contained in the document.
I'm grateful, Professor Bokwing, with that explanation there. Newsnight starts right now.